Hi everybody, and welcome to our literary lunch break at Faneuil Hall Marketplace. My name is Larry Lindner and I'm the coordinator of the Boston Literary District. Danielle Legros George is a professor in the Creative Arts and Learning Division at Lesley University. Her areas of academic interest include arts and education, contemporary American poetry, African American poetry, Caribbean literature and studies, and literary translation.
As Poet Laureate, I serve as a poetry ambassador. And so I'm really happy to be joined by two emissaries from the land of poetry and also from the world of carpentry. How can these two worlds converge? Carpenters who are poets, poets who are carpenters. These individuals, whom I will introduce to you in a second, these brave men stand here before us at historic Faneuil Hall, built in 1742, to embody the junction of nails and words, the junction of joists and enjambments, of moldings and metaphors. They are members of the Jamaica Plain Carpenter Poets, which we'll find out about from Joe. And so I'm thrilled to be reading with them today. I'll give you a quick introduction to each of them. Joe Bergin, the gentleman here with the wonderful tie on, has lived in Boston since the 1970s when he wore the spats of a Parker House waiter when he worked at the Last Hurrah. And you know who also worked there? Guess who? Malcolm X, yes, and Ho Chi Minh. Who knew? Also reading today is Bill Thibodeau, chugging down his water over there in this corner, who has published 2 books of poetry, American Icon and Other Poems, and The Watchman.
Hi. I'm a Carpenter poet in Jamaica Plain, but I'm also I do my own poetry aside from the Carpenter poets. But we do read every Thanksgiving, and we're charged to write 1 poem about carpentry for our big reading in Jamaica Plain. But I have other as well. I'm going to start off with something called Alliteration Oz. What price poets pay to please, through heavy haunted hearts that bleed. They sacrifice sad souls to tease, to a world that waits and wants and needs. The finest fools seek forever flames, whose pleasures promise pangs of pain. A cruel caress only nearly tames what will roar and rise and rage again. The world shan't say I did not strive to proudly pierce her precious heart. When high you shoot, someone must sigh. Yes, this I've sensed from the very start. Or what's the use in saying things these captivated ears can't hear? For songs this soul sings turn fate echoings, which will bring her never, never near. Yeah. Now the second one is a Carpenter poem. I read it, I think, last year at the Carpenter Poets annual reading. It's called Homeless. The child I was, would he know me now as I raise this skeleton house frame from foundation? Affixing flesh to wooden ribs, imparting with each hammer stroke small flakes of my own soul? Would he know me still as I unroll my tape and mark each raw stud and rafter, each piece of molding, easing the saw down as I have so often done? Will he remember the first time and remind me of that original merging of matter and spirit, the drawing, the staging, and the execution, the secret inner survey, and the silent walking away? Will he remind me that he had this life in mind, that this was to be the measure of me? Had the wandering child in me chosen for his wandering self a labor that leaves fragments of its homeward self in the fixed nest of others? Warm in winter, dry in rain, sheltered from the summer sun and the windswept dust of drought? Had I been early built to build houses to house the homeless pieces of me? Homeless? Thank you. Bostonians, if you look out over the harbor, you'll see an island called Spectacle Island. Are you all familiar with that one? Well, it's called that because in the old days it looked like two spectacles from the air, two drumlins attached by a sand spit, so they called it Spectacle Island. So I wrote a poem based on that. Green eyes rise above harbor waves, fixed apertures, irises, portals, astride the bridge of the wave-racked nose of an ancient sunken face, sea-rimmed crystal lenses around which fish swirl in concentric circles. In daylight, these fair eyes squint while seabirds dart and dive past clouds that float in the upper air and drop shadows and snow into the low. The eyes watch through frozen frames the full fall of sun and rise of moon, the drift of stars, and flights of migrant birds that sweep towards unseen shores. These immobile orbs, passive players with the pulse of wind and wave, those fluid motions that know no fixed framework, connected by sand spit and seagrass, polished by stones, around which the elements glide, divide, and disperse. Through blinkless stare, they watch planes arrive and depart, sails dip and ships pass in periphery. Flotsam arrives as most that tease the eye, with hints of a wider world in flux. The eyes of this sea salt sphinx, crumbling colossus, calmly await time's erosive gift into the current, grain after grain. I think I read one more and I'll pass. This is called On Wine. My peace is liquid, languish in these rooms, while my dust double anticipates the broom. For two become the one on shop-worn floor, says he, the orbit of a spinning loom. For stars are what this world of skin discards, leaves once they fall to earth in wind-drift shards, far past a mere volcanic jet ejects, dark comfort in the realm Orion guards. Peace, I know thy amplitude at rest, sharp contrast to the lows of earthly jest. The regions of this sphere I haunt today, tomorrow to the cosmic cloud infest. The froth that tricks my chin down to my breast once held the antidote in ruby dressed. Sore, it is now containment for the bleed. The cup today scant, yesterday arrests. I cannot know the lips that call this I, equate these rooms I live to where I'll die, yet trace a crooked orbit to this spot, with that same finger mark where I will lie. Thank you.
Only. Nature hides the most beautiful design, the norm, the anomaly, the rare, the rarest, which is to say, the only. And aren't we each, twins even, only? This next poem is entitled Praise Song for Boston. And there's a reference to the Massachusetts, who are the First Nation people, the Indian people who were here at the time the Europeans settled this area. Praise Song for Boston. Begin with the Massachusetts, who set their nets in the harbor of Boston before it was Boston Harbor, when it was Conhasset, place of clear water, and arrive at my door. I, immigrant, like so many settlers, nestled in your arms, write this poem to you, Boston. If I write Tremont, it's for your hills, some still standing, others raised, the land changed, as lands are, as time passes, and yet history is yours, Boston. The good and the bad of it, the inarticulated and the often stated, a Puritan's beacon, Wheatley's pen, Winthrop's city upon a hill, and the vision and grandeur that are gardeners. Also the words lost to the gray and blue Atlantic. If I place an emerald necklace at your feet, it's to match the medallions of your ever-turning wheels, your bicycles and school buses, the railroads and helms of trade, of fate, of fire and grit. The wheels of your great house of science, the wheels of your great house of knowledge and your great house of art. International since the day you were born, Boston, if cities are born. And if you're grown, then out of everything you have grown, a revolution's spark, the arc of a wide bridge, cables stayed, lit electric. Out of wharves and new waves you have grown, out of the complicated notions of freedom and forward, and the ease of summer days, and sturdy neighbors. Chris, young terror of Sumner Street. Alana, eating a pear and already in 3rd grade. John, but call him Mac. Santiago, who yells louder than God, and Wendy, who yells even louder. And Wayne, uncle to us all, from his big yellow house, greeting each newcomer to the neighborhood. Welcome to the neighborhood, he says. Welcome. Thank you. Okay, one more, Virgil. Let's see. All right. Still life with orbs. Between the thing and the name of it is a world, and a world behind this world. There is my mask placed on the table. There is the wooden table and the space beneath it. There is an orange on the floor when it should be on the table, in the yellow basket meant for oranges, but which contains a cat licking one front paw. What do cats know of manners? What do birds know of water unless they plunge their beaks into it, breaking some poor fish's sleep? What do fish know of birds, except the slash of bill, the sudden flash, the stop?
Carpenter Poets started about 10 years ago. We all went down to, a bunch of us, to James's Gate Tavern in Jamaica Plain, and sat around this big pine table in front of a roaring fire and swapped stories about the hardships of our jobs and the danger of carpentry and jokes and what have you. And one night a fella came in with some poems from his architect. They were by Mark Turpin, who's a poet and wrote about carpentry, and he read the poems to us and we said we can do that, and we decided to have a Carpenter Poet Night. A couple of months after that, January 2005, if I'm correct. And it was amazing, it was astounding, the poems that poured out of these people. these carpenters and some painters, and I just want to read a quote. Since that time, the Carpenter Poets have been heard on NPR, Here and Now, been written about in USA Today and the Boston Globe, and appeared on New Morning America. Their poetry has many themes: celebration, lamentation, insights gained from wood and the craft, historical perspective, funny and dangerous situations, dealing with customers and the beloved characters you work with and depend on every day. And as one wag, Carpenter Poet, said, "We'll never run out of things to say about carpentry. It's too vast a subject." So the rule is you have to write a Carpenter poem once a year, Monday after Thanksgiving. And all across Jamaica Plain, there are many worried carpenters scribbling the night before, trying to come up with something. And I was one of them one year. And I was really stuck, and I kind of stretched like this, and I went like this, and I held up my pencil that was always tucked behind my ear, and I thought, can I write about that? And the muse is sometimes kind to you when you're up against it. This is called the yellow pencil. The Eberhard Faber Mongol, or the Dixon Oriole, the yellow shark of construction behind your ear, tilted at the right jaunty angle to signify just who you are. Some stick it in their hat to compensate for batwing ears. Others have close to cranium ears to grip said pencil even when bending over a gosh darn board in judgment. A yellow pencil is indispensable in building a Roman aqueduct, although they didn't have them in those days, or an overly extended Mansfield Park English mansion, or a craft-wrought restoration in the early American treasure trove of architecture on Beacon Hill and on the old Charles River watershed of Back Bay. The architect Van Allen had one behind his ear when the Chrysler Building shot up into the Manhattan skyline, completed just before Christmas in 1930. You build the stairs, you take the care. You sharpen your true weapon and thereafter fire up the machinery. Here's to the tool that builds skyscrapers, mansions, and shacks. The yellow pencil, so simple, the connection between mind on paper, translated into the form of structure that is the most practical of shelter of we humans in the whole wide world. Yellow pencil. Thank you. Teresa and I were getting a tour of the Central Massachusetts farmland from farmer Glenn Stillman, who has a booth right over here in the Boston Public Market, the best fruits and vegetables anywhere. And we were coming into Hardwick, and there was this little house up on a hill, this beautiful little acreage, and it was so perfect. It was a little bandbox of a house. And I asked Glenn about it, and he said, well, nobody lives there anymore. That was Homer Prouty's house. And I said, well, the landscape is so beautifully maintained. He said, well, a woman does that in his memory. So this is what I wrote about that. Homer Prouty's house. Saw it on a drive with farmer Glenn Stillman, coming into Hardwick, set back a bit on a half acre, chimney up high, good draft for the fire. A vigilant woman plants a garden every spring for him in fond memory. On that handsome plot, still well kept, in tribute to his character. Homer Prouty, thank you. This was written by a man who is actually a primary education teacher, and he has that amazing ability to be childlike without being childish. He's a beautiful person, Jerry Abelow, and he was on vacation from school, and I desperately needed a helper, and I asked him to help me, and he did. And Carpenter Poet Night was coming up, And I said, you know, you could write a Carpenter poem and join the group. So he did. And it's called Federalist Style. I am inspired by you, full energy overflow, struggling to set your thought. Makes me remember younger days, the old house, excellent Federalist style, the newspaper stated, next to the hill of the big view, not too far from the praying Indians of Ponkapog. First time in such construction, pine floors, worn nails, look behind the chimney, a place for Puritans to hide, soapstone sink, big and wide, great for little beer kegs. This engineer, the teacher, the motorcycle man, park people, the sweet conservationist, growers of all kind, sitting in the kitchen, speaking their mind. Choke cherry trees in the front yard lashed together, making a place for sweat bath taking. Guided by a friend, we made it together. Federalist style, thank you. Now, in the trades, there are codes passed down, kind of oral tradition, certain things that you shouldn't do. Obviously, one is that we all know about is don't walk under a ladder, particularly when someone is working up there. Another one is don't criticize another tradesman's work to a customer when he's not there. And another one is don't take that job that's gone south and be the second contractor on that job. Just bad luck. But the big rule is, which I broke in this poem, it's the big rule to not break. And this poem is literally true. I broke the rule. I broke the rule and did a job I could see from my own house twice. One nearly drove me to madness and bankruptcy. The other one turned out nice. Thank you.
Viewers at home, you know, there's nothing wrong with the color on your TV set. The three poets are all wearing blue shirts. We know we didn't color coordinate, it just happened that way. This one's called Ruby, another one about wine. There is a thought that rests before the lips, whispers quiet, do you remember this? You may respond as if we hadn't met, but to your eye affix a memory wet. Two laying upon the sand a summer's day, two waves to crest and fall upon their way. While dust became the product of that merge, deep years protect the shadows of that urge. Project upon this wall a fugitive smile to alight the darkness where I live. Though wine will set the motion to that plea, its absence while I sleep won't rescue me. So now upon the sand my skin abrades, made worse the sting of salt as summer fades. I pour the wine as balm into that sore. It soaks as you have done through every pore. Thank you, Rob. Any closer, I'll be spitting like pop, pop. But I'll try to not say any poems with a P in it, I guess. This is called Pauvre Gerard, for a friend. The reaching ocean waves wash smooth my footprints and my advances, as an early morning tide flows near to this barren higher ground where I now make my stand. My hair in tousled disarray, upon my lips the stinging spray, as a gale of the stormy wintry sea courses through my mind and soul, and bears its starkness inward to an even stormier land. While the wind and stream around my body channels past the bay, soon shall the sea's ever-present desires pass for want of sail. For sails are rent and rigging stripped, and all that stands is mast. A king's pine, tall and true, yet bare, as bone upon the shore is cast. It stares intently at the line which blends the earth and sea and sky, that lures the strong of heart to seek, yet reach but with the eye. So where does man's life then begin? His unbound pages in the wind, when each step brings him closer to, yet further from his naked truth? While the dunes behind now casting shadows, day is on the wane. The sea has ebbed to foreign ports, and I a few steps closer of fame. The wind has ceased its futile blast. My world is in the lee of life and love, pain and death, leaving time alone in me. Oh, these winds and tides shall never bring the horizon any nearer to me. They serve to pound my memory with those who've come and drifted through me. Heaven, I wonder if the waves that wash this trodden shore collect my footprints from the sand and deposit but a bit of me with each tide on another land. This is for all the people who have gone on before us to that other strange land, wherever that may be, as they're preparing to go, and is actually as they're going. It's called I Know. As you near, throw the floating anchor, woven from spider silk on bone, into the straits of time, and I will seek you. As you approach, open the lantern and bid the candles smoke as incense drift to float above the fields of trial, and I will meet you. When you arrive, apprise the yellow bees to whisper in my ears the news of your release. I will send them hive home with the pensive pollen answer that I know. Thank you.
Poems are built of words, are built of language. So what happens when you don't have the words necessary with which to write, a poem? You write titles of poems. Titles of poems when I could not write poems. A collection of hairballs from the drain of the author. Lectures by the minor gods. The objects of visual inquiry. The house, the house, the house is on fire. What poverty will do to you. The ellipses of love. My undying love for you and how it died. Some hog meat for Joe. Not Joe Bergin. And I stole that title from Sam Cornish, who was Boston's first poet laureate. Let's both pretend to be famous painters. Torpor. Blossom. Elise in the city of light. Elise as a farmer. Evidence is evanescent. The purr of an agile cat.
We have a poet among our ranks by the name of Dave Murphy. Murph, of course, we call him. He's kind of a legendary figure. A lot of poems have been written about him. And kind of a Paul Bunyan among men. And he was working at our house and put in a door, a new door in an old frame, which is an extremely tricky proposition. It's kind of strikes fear into even a good carpenter's heart sometimes. And he did such a beautiful job that I was moved to write about it. There is nothing like a door, for David A. Murphy. There is nothing like a door nothing like a door. Well hung with intelligent margins, lock sets clicking sweetly in place, with a full light through which to view the woods and garden in the back. A perfect delight. There's nothing like a door that is anything like a door. For Dave Murphy, thank you. An historical poem from our Will Rogers poet, Carl Weinhardt. His father was an architect, it's kind of in his blood. He's been a carpenter all his life. And when he reads, he has these big, giant, gnarly hands that are very animated. It's a beautiful sight to see read. The pit saw. In the old days, when you were going to rip a board lengthwise, you had to dig a pit, and somebody was in the pit with one handle of this big rip saw, and the other one had to straddle the pit, and it was very laborious, took a long time, and all kinds of weather. Had to get those boards ripped. So this is called The Pit Saw by Carl Weinhardt. And you can tell Carl's classically educated here. Says Euripides to Euripidos. These saws is dull and my fingers is froze. Looks like we's could use a couple of teas, says Euripidos to Euripides. And so they stop to warm their maws, make fast the files and sharpen their saws. Says Euripides to Euripidos, we need more boards to build these shelves. Says Euripidos to Euripides, those boards ain't gonna rip themselves. Carl Weinhardt. Thank you. We have a haiku master poet. His name is Brooks Wright. He ran a big operation for a contracting company in the Back Bay. So many wealthy customers, much fine work brought in, $1 million jobs. And this one is called Carpenter Poem. Be a good carpenter. Don't be a bad carpenter. To be a carpenter is a noble thing, unless you're dogging it, or milking it, or drunk and drilling. That probably happened after lunch. Client poem. I'm so pleased. This is really beautiful. This is unacceptable. I'm very unhappy. The work weaves and bobs in answering. Oh, Brooksy's always writing about how you have to torture a board to make it pressure treated. You have to go through all these different steps. This is called no pressure treated. To be just rough sawn and air dried, what simple happy torture for a board. Monkey carpenter. Monkey carpenter, don't turn on that power saw. It might injure you. Lunch. This daily visit is the great center, holier than coffee break, an open door that everywhere is entered. The holy lunch break. With a tip of the hat to Larry Lindner. Thank you. I write under the nom de plume of the Carpenter philosopher, and he gives you good advice. And this advice is don't take that shortcut. And we're all tempted to take a shortcut when you're doing manual labor. But you have to remember the craft, and it's going to be around for a while. Don't take that shortcut. Don't take that shortcut. It'll cost a lot of time, and fraying nerves and lumber, and call for a tool you cannot find. Put the board on the odd angle and mark it cut it wrong and try again. Fight the growing urge to hurry. Put your inner maniac back in its den. You might think you've grown quite clever, just a cut above the rest. And when the final judgment call comes from our boss Carpenter, that you might stand in the circle of the best. But don't be lost too long in that grand vision, thinking that you reinvented the wheel when you steered clear of doing it right and the long way and took the wrong road for a little time to steal. Thank you.
Well, if they say poetry is life, Quincy Market is certainly a lot of life going on here. Sirens and vendors and birds, and just very nice. I'm glad to be here. I'll finish, my last poem will be called Annie on the Stairs. For all you poets, for all you carpenters, let me back up on that. I mean, people who own old houses, you may be able to identify with this. These pine stairs were once an inch thick. Now in places they're about half of that. How they held up, I'll never understand. At first sight I held my breath, but looks can be deceiving. I knew they'd outlast me. Annie was always after me to replace them, saying, "But isn't that what you do?" Yes, I'd say, then quickly change the subject, and she soon gave up her asking. How could I explain? They were in rough shape when we bought this place. We were so young and this house so old. And after a hard day on the job, in the heat, the dust and the noise, learning the ropes on icy staging, in the wind, with the snow-covered ground so far below, my fingers remember it all. After chores and dinner with Annie, I'd hit those stairs and hear those familiar creaks and groans. Each stair had its own pitch and tone, like old pine piano keys on a world-weary board. I looked forward to those sounds because I knew we made it through another hard day. After cleaning up, I'd lie in bed, reading, or thinking about the bills, or about time, and what an older version of us will be like. Then I'd hear Annie on those old stairs, playing her own sweet melody. I knew that the door would soon be opening, and that I'd be putting to bed those old cares. The kids came and grew, and stair music went from hesitant to playful and raucous, and more than once to anger. Yet, at the end of the day, I'd hear Annie on those stairs. And on those later than curfew high school nights, when they thought I couldn't hear, it was that safe at home at last music that cut through my frustration and my fear. And that's when I knew Annie knew. The kids are since gone. The stairs are still holding up, mostly. Every so often I tamp down a restless nail or two, a battle I know I'll soon lose. On these long winter nights, when I feel as old as this house, I know I'll be leaving that fight for the next guy, just as long as I hear Annie on the stairs. Thank you all.
That was really lovely. Love spell number 8. I will watch you watch me. I will be the faintest beat, the tannest shade of heart, a pulse imperceptible. If your house has a middle post, I am it. If your lake ripples only once, I am the sand grain dropped in it. Okay, one more. All right. Relationships are built things, I suppose. This is about a long-distance relationship abetted by technology, Skype, etc. The dear remote nearness of you, for Patrick. Our journey has been strange, each in the other's hand, almost and sometimes not. Across the space you seem to pixelate a dream, a breakage and a screen. Your simulacrum since the last I held you fast, en chair et en os, one joint against the next, your hand soft on my neck, your clavicle and chest, my breast against your breast. And thus 3 years have passed, like water, air, like glass, on dusty roads, in plains, on mountain tops, and me against the you I thought you were, and you against your sense of me, and finally, and still, and yet, some space above it all for falling free, while somehow tied, a knotted to, a ribbon, a small boat on the ocean, an oar and open sea, a we. Thanks.
Well, I broke 2 rules, actually, regarding this next poem. I did a job I could not only see from my own house, it was right next door, and it belonged to a friend of mine. But the situation required it, and I was happy to jump up on the scaffolding. And I was working with our friend Carl Weinhardt, and I noticed that all the columns on our street in Jamaica Plain, William Street, were flared out at the middle and tapered at the top. And I had never really thought about that before, so I asked Carl about it, and he said one word, entasis. And I said, where did that come from? He said, well, it's a Greek style of architecture from the temples to counteract the optical illusion of straight columns that look like they're curving in the middle. So they flare out. And I'm also quoting a poem by Robert Francis, who's an old poet from contemporary Robert Frost. Museum Vase. It contains nothing. We ask it to contain nothing. It is endlessly content to be. Still it broods on old burdens, wheat, oil, wine. These beautiful Grecian elliptical front porch pillars on William Street contain nothing. They are supremely decorative, yet more surprisingly, there are no vertical uplift timbers within, which upon personal discovery has mystified every carpenter I've known who has ventured into these columns' interior. By a miracle of the builder's craft, they are a marriage of beauty and function, the startling discovery of the load-bearing capability of hollow columns supporting temple pediments of stone in ancient Greece, an old and exceedingly clever concept brought to all these many three-deckers on William Street. And what is more, their vertical trajectory forms the most subtle curvature, spare at the top, flaring out at the middle, and arriving at a strong dimension at the base, following some divine formula of some kind of tempered Fibonacci geometric line found in nature, perhaps in the wing of a monarch, all lined up on William Street, imparting an aesthetic enjoyment felt somehow deep within your soul. They do not brood. Their work is in the here and now, soundly supporting dead loads of the lumber of the porches and live loads of the revelers, crowded above on Christmas, St. Patrick's Day, and 4th of July. You stand at the head of the street, and sighting down the line of these most impressive of Boston structures, our proud and towering three-deckers, you see the sublime entasis of the front porch columns. Entasis, a slight convexity or swelling, as in the shaft of a column intended to compensate for the illusion of concavity resulting from straight sides. A most beautiful solution to what eludes the eye, celebrating the elements of form and function, beauty and structure, nature and craft. A perfection of architecture that informs us in its subtle way as we go about our daily rounds on this beloved street, enhanced somehow and supported by the gift of a grace note to the pillars of our community. Thank you.
He tapped his traction control button twice to turn on the competitive driving control, but the Expedition sped up.